Welcome back to the Total Focus podcast. Our special guest this week is Elizabeth Peace, or Jennifer Elizabeth, depending on how you know her. She's a former Ms. Maryland International, and she just finished in the top 3 at Nationals. This is a wonderful person trying to affect change. Her platform is all about giving awareness to children's abuse, and this is something you absolutely 100% need to learn more about. So please stay tuned and learn all about this. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, I really appreciate it. Everyone else didn't get to hear our third recording after electrical strike. We had a bad storm here at my office, and we lost our entire interview. So this will be my 2 mistakes that I pointed out. That I missed 2 interviews previously, and we had this awesome interview, and electrical strike came and knocked it all out. So this is going to be our 4th charm. So just cross our fingers, nothing happens this time, and we really spark magic like we did last time. So
Yes, I was going to say thank you for having me again.
yeah, exactly. You didn't know it was going to be like a private conversation. You thought it would be more worldwide, but
Yeah, I thought more people might hear all the things we talked about, but that's okay. If I inspired one person, then I have completed my job. So,
well, if I do have the privilege of ever having kids, I'll make sure to definitely take all the lessons that you're going to teach us right now. So
thank you.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on was to talk about how you got into pageants, because as you had told us, you didn't really do pageants that much when you were younger. So why don't you tell us again how you got into pageants?
Sure. So I get asked all the time. I think people just kind of assume that I did pageants growing up, or I get asked for tips or advice, and I still feel really new to pageantry. Although I think after doing Mrs. International a couple weeks ago, I can't say that I'm new anymore. But sometimes it feels like it when I meet these wonderful women who have competed since they were very young, or since they were in high school, or who did the Miss USA system. And growing up, I just never thought that I would ever feel pretty enough, or that I would ever feel good enough to do that. And for those in pageantry, that means I had a complete misconception of what pageants were and what they were about. So I admit that when I very first heard about pageants and really got interested and involved, it wasn't until after I was married. And so I did one pageant in 2008. And let me just tell you, it was horrendous. It was the most horrible thing. And to this day, I feel so bad for the judges that they had to interview me. I was a journalist, and I thought I was just going to kill that interview. And it was so bad. Way back then, I didn't even know what my clothing size was. I truly had no idea what size of dress I was supposed to buy. I showed up to the pageant with a dress from church. And that was my first real experience with true and long lasting female friendships. Because go ahead.
To me, even that just shows how innocent you are. That you have, you're like, oh, I'm just gonna wear this nice church dress. I'm gonna look nice and put together, and then like, you get like this big wake up call. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's it. It was embarrassing, but it was such a
It's not.
great learning opportunity because first
You
off,
must
I didn't.
fall. You must fall before you can
Yes,
walk. So
yes. And in fact, I love to use a Will Smith quote: "Fall hard, fall often, but fall forward."
yes.
And I fell forward. I learned from it. I just want your listeners to know I did not wear the church dress on stage, because the director saw it and said no. So she was like, it still is. She's still a friend of mine today. She is this 6 foot tall, beautiful former queen who is just such an amazing person with such a good spirit. And she said, "Here, take one of my old dresses." And one of the other contestants, the night before the pageant, stayed up all night long because I'm all of not even 5'2", and she hemmed that thing and fitted it to me, and made sure that I had something I could wear on stage the very next evening.
Well,
And I'll tell you,
let's not forget to point out that your director is a 6 foot tall
mhm.
woman that you idolize, and
Yeah.
you basically put you put the idea that you put in my mind was the dress was this beautiful size 0 dress, and you were completely like, okay, so what am I supposed to do with like this big long train? And okay, I'm a normal size woman, like I'm not a size 0, I'm, like, so the way you described it the first time was so more like descriptive. So let's
Oh, I'm
yeah,
so
please.
sorry.
No, but like I definitely want everyone to understand, like, you've totally felt like out of the way I described it
Oh yeah.
back to you. Response was like, you're definitely a fish out of water, because
Mhm.
your director's like, here, just take this, and you're like, okay, and you're swimming in the dress.
Let's put it this way: it was a high low,
Right.
and the high part went to my ankles.
Oh.
So, for anyone who's met me in person, my good friend Spring calls me fun sized. Mrs. Australia calls me pocket sized. I am short. I am not a tall person.
I think fun size is a great compliment. I think I would
Oh yeah.
if I were you, I would definitely take as a compliment, because there's so many other ways to say it. Fun size is such a, it's associated with so many good things. So
You know what? The next pageant I compete in, I will, when it asks for height, I'll just put fun size.
yes, please.
I might do that. Let me ask my coach Amanda. Let me let me run that through her. This is where being what I consider new at pageants gets me in trouble, because I'm like, this is a good idea, and then I go to Amanda and she's like, oh my gosh, I thought you wanted to win.
Hey, look, I can be sassy and fun too.
Yeah. And then sometimes there's like crossing the line, and I have to ask her where that line is.
Well, right,
So,
exactly. Do you just want to go and have fun, or do you want to win? So you
I do.
tell me.
You know what? I'll tell you what. Pageants are a wonderful. I mean, what a great opportunity for spreading your platform. But I'll tell you, if I just wanted to have fun, I would not choose something so expensive.
That is true. I mean,
Yeah.
you could go to Walt Disney World for very cheaper
Right.
price, and Walt Disney World is extremely expensive. So
Right. And I'll tell you, I'm a competitive person. So if I'm competing
to
to
win,
try to win.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
absolutely.
Well,
So
every year
yeah.
you do better. Like let's also let's put
Hmm.
the audience in. Um, every year you've done even better. And this year you were in top
Yes.
5. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. So
you're going to win. Like
mm, thank
it's
you.
just you need to find
Eventually, right?
you're gonna
The
find your
odds will
year.
be in my favor eventually.
Exactly. Hey, it's definitely like the Hunger Games. If you just
Right.
you have to kill everyone until you win.
Oh my gosh.
You know.
Well, so I went from back in 2008. I went from my very first pageant to wearing, on a normal basis, my clothes were at least two sizes too big. I went from that to taking a long break. In 2016, I competed in one state, went to nationals, did not make top 15. Then I was Mrs. Maryland International and made top 16 at Mrs. International in 2018. I'm trying to think of the years here. And then I just competed for Mrs. International again about a couple weeks ago, and I was second runner up. So the one thing I've learned is that if you are always learning and you are, falling forward, then you're doing well. I mean, you are. It is really important to me that I'm always exceeding my own expectations, and that I am always growing as a person and growing in what I'm learning in pageants. But I also want to remind people that, if I compete again, there's always that chance that you don't even make the top 15. Pageants are very subjective. And so I don't want anyone to ever take a pageant or scores or a pageant placement and think it has anything to do with their value or worth, because it doesn't. So pageants, I love what they do for me personally. I have grown every year that I've done a pageant. So I'm hoping that the next time is it. I know that I'm ready to be Mrs. International. I know that I am. But if 5 people don't believe that I am, then that just means God said that's not your door. And
This
that's all that
year,
means.
this year, but
Right, right.
that
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's a permanent thing. It just means that this year.
Hmm.
The other thing, the most important thing, is that you need to be prepared to be the national title holder before you're
Right.
crowned too. You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
it's just
Absolutely.
like in faith. If you're a very religious person, or you just believe in something, you have to believe that it's already occurred for you to accomplish it. In
Hmm.
most cases, it's very rare that it comes out of nowhere. You really have to believe. I mean, that's why the um the Oprah book, the and I can't think of the book, called, um um that you have to believe, you have to dream it, you have to believe it, you have to work
Hmm.
for it to accomplish it. So I mean,
Right.
you're on that road. I mean, each year you do better and better.
Hmm.
So and you've gone through 3 systems, so now it sounds like you've really found your home with
Oh, yes. Oh,
international. So
yes.
what makes it so um important to stay with international?
Well, I think it's important to me. So, for those who don't know, my very first pageant was with Mrs. United States. And then I tried the Mrs. America pageant. And then I found Mrs. International. And that was when I found my home. I believe that there is a pageant for every pageant personality out there. And for me, international being truly 50% platform based and scores truly being 50% about your interview, which I don't know if the other girls know this, but in some of the other systems, they'll say that your score is 50% interview, but that score is broken in half by how you speak and how you look in interview.
Oh,
And
I didn't even
so,
know that. We didn't even talk
yeah,
about this last time. That
yeah,
that's
I
that's
don't,
cruel. That's really cruel, because
um,
how's looks have to do anything with the way you talk and the way you're
right,
educated and the way.
right. Yeah,
Wow.
I think that if I were asked to judge a pageant where they said, okay, 50% is how they look in their interview outfit, and 50 and I'm sorry, yeah, so if interviews 50% and half of that is how they look and half of that is how they talk about their platform or whatever else you talk about, then I would say, okay, I'm looking at how I personally, this is just me, former TV news anchor, I would be looking at how comfortable are they, how is their delivery, are they comfortable in their own outfit, did they pick something that complements them, because everybody has a different body type, so did they pick a color and a fit that complements them and matches their personality, or do they seem really uncomfortable because they chose something, that the previous winner wore the last year. So that's what I'd be looking for, but I can't say that that's what every judge is doing, and I think every contestant should know that that's what they're being scored on, and I just think it would be fair to know that up front. So when I look at international, it's truly 50% platform. It's truly 50% interview. It's the only system I've ever done where I've gotten my scores back. And it is the only system I've ever done where in the interview, the judges focused mostly on platform and what I would do as Mrs. International, where in a previous national pageant, I was asked some very awkward questions. And some people have been asked some very inappropriate questions. I think a lot of us know in the Mrs. System know what I'm talking about. But to me,
You're so polite.
being
You're so polite. You really are. There's so many ways to there's so many ways
so
to
many ways I
navigate.
could have said
There's
that.
so many ways to navigate that question, but you're so polite.
Uh, you know, I try really hard at my age to not be judgmental of others. So I will just say that Mrs. International fits my personality
Exactly.
better, and it's my home, and I will never stray from that system at
I
this point.
I will. I'll take it this way. I'll say it this way. As you get older, there's plenty of bones that people can bury
Mm,
on top of you. So the less bones that you can accrue as you get older, the better it is. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I would just say for anyone who's still looking for their home, if you haven't given international a try, I personally believe in it. I have been through the three, major systems, and this is one that I truly feel is fair, and that I felt like my scores were reflective of either how I did or how those five people thought that I did, and their opinion, not did I do enough fundraising for the system. So I would definitely give it a try. And I just have not found a better system than Mrs. International, at least a better system for me, because platform was the reason I started doing pageants in the first place. And this was a really great fit for that. And I've heard, people have said, but it's so expensive. And I would say, having done all of them, it's no more expensive than any other national pageant that I have done. It's about the price of going and winning state and then going on to nationals. So, yes, pageants in general are not cheap. And I would really encourage all women who are looking into it that you have to be very good at fundraising, which is the most uncomfortable thing for me to do ever, or you have to be in a place where you can go ahead and you can fund it comfortably, because I don't think you should do a pageant if the cost of it is so uncomfortable and unbearable for your family. I just don't think it's a good idea, because you don't need a pageant to advocate for your platform. And on the other hand, if you are in a place and you are lucky and you are able to do a pageant and to have a title, I will say it has carried me so far with my platform, further than I had gotten without a title.
Well, you brought it up, so I think this would be a perfect transition to really talk about it. But I did want to sum up that
Hmm.
pageants are expensive. So no
Yeah.
matter what pageant you do, the excuse shouldn't be that it's expensive. The excuse should be, what do I personally need to do to get what I want in life? Do I need to get a really great job so I can afford it and be able to do extra income things? You go to the
Hmm.
movies, or this is extra income, the disposable income that you want. So you're choosing with your extra disposable income and extra time to do this,
Yeah.
okay? And it takes a little bit of time. Or you're really good at fundraising, okay? And maybe you should be a
Hmm.
politician at that point,
Right.
because if you can raise money there, you can raise money as a politician. So I think that the most important thing is everything costs money. If there's value in it, people see value in the international system. So of course it's going to be a little bit more expensive. So that's basically plain and simple. There's more value in it. So
And I often say to judges in interview, and I probably should stop, but it's truly how I see it. I really feel that pageants are a lot like running for office. You not only have to be very good at getting the word out about what you're doing and why you're doing it and why you care and how that will impact other people, or and not or but and you've got to be able to fund it, and then also you have to have the family support to do it. So you have to have all of those things. And just like running for office, like I could never run for office if my husband did not support me running for office, because it really involves the entire family, especially when the person who ends up winning either the pageant or the election, they are spending time doing exactly what they promised they would do. And that takes time from your family and with your family doing your advocacy with you. So I really feel that in a lot of ways, pageants are a lot like running for office.
no, I absolutely 100% agree with you. Pageants are either a great way to practice on your skills to become eventually a politician and run for
Mm-hmm.
local or state or for the national office, or it's just a very commonality that there's a singularity between the two, because
Mm-hmm.
one, you have to build a platform that represents you. You have to build a public figure. You have
Yeah.
to have flyers. You need to have outreach. You need to have public appearances. Those are everything that you do if you're running for office.
Mm-hmm.
The only
And a
difference,
wardrobe, a
and a word,
wardrobe for all of
yes,
it.
yes, no, you're absolutely.
Yep.
The only difference is that you don't walk around on stage and they vote. They give you score. There's one night and
Yeah.
they vote for you if they like you or not. So kind of the same, but maybe it's a little bit difficult because they have to judge you without even knowing you. At least with a pageant, they get to know you, so maybe it's
Right.
a little bit um, more honest um, depiction of what actually happened. Like on a pageant, because
Hmm.
they actually get to know you more. So,
Yeah. And then when you win, you spend the rest of your reign or your year or your time in office advocating and doing all the things you promised that you would do. At least I hope. I hope. And as we have seen both in pageants and with politicians, not always the case, but that's the way it should be.
of course, and the you had mentioned this last time, but I again, I just want to point out the people that don't win, and then they go out and they continue to fundraise and they continue to do good things in their community, even if
Hmm.
they are the ones that are just completely amazing.
Hmm.
And I know
Those are
that
my
you,
favorite. Those are my favorite people.
and I know you said that you felt that they're your favorite people. So,
Hmm.
because if you think about it, those are the people that really do care. So,
Right, right. I mean, you should not need a pageant to advocate for your platform. You should be doing that whether you win or not. You should be doing it before and after. And so if somebody has stopped doing their platform after a pageant, whether they won or not, then I just feel like it wasn't really about their platform to begin with. And I'm really hoping that more pageant judges will do a better job kind of seeing which of the contestants in all systems, I'm not talking about international, in all systems, which of these contestants really, really care and chose a platform that was very personal to them, that have a tie to it, that have done it long before they decided to do a pageant and will do it long after.
I just wanted to take 1 second from this great interview and talk about our sponsor of the week, Mid Atlantic Video and Photography Productions. No matter if you're planning a wedding, a special event, or you just need an amazing headshot, they are the team to get the job done. You can reach out to them at 443 422 3830. Again, that's 443 422 3830. Or you can just go right to their website at mavpp.com. Now let's get right back to the show and listen to this great interview. Now that we've been talking about platforms and what's so important, what's your platform so let everyone knows? So,
Oh, yeah, my platform is Operation Innocence, protecting America's smallest heroes, or our smallest heroes, even around the world. I was sexually abused through a lot of my childhood. So I have always had a passion and a care and a concern about helping children who have been sexually abused. And as a journalist, that translated into being one of the few people willing to say, I will do that story. I will be the one who follows up on that. And as a journalist, I would do these stories about children who've been abused, the statistics on how many kids are being abused, what to do if a child has been abused. And I will say that prior to being a journalist, I served in the military as a police officer in the Air Force, and we call it security forces officer. And so, as a survivor of child sex abuse, as a former security forces officer, when I became a mom, I thought, I've got this. I've got this. I Nothing is going to happen to my kids. But the one thing that I didn't know until I realized I didn't know, I didn't know how to prevent it in in the first place. I just had no idea that there was a way you could actually prevent kids from being sexually abused. I just knew what to do afterward, who to tell, how to report, what to say to a child. I knew that. But when it happened to my own children, I had that one question that I kept asking people, and I finally got an answer, which was, how could I have stopped this in the first place? Where did I go wrong? This very much felt like a personal failure. As a mom, I felt like I had failed my children deeply because I couldn't prevent it in the first place. And that was when a friend of mine by the name of Kaylee Sparling, she's an amazing human being, amazing soul, she introduced me to an organization called Darkness to Light. And they have now been my international partner for 7 years. And I have been working with them on preventing child sex abuse and then what to do if it happens. So for the
I
last
mean,
7 years,
I mean,
yeah.
just having a kid is scary,
Oh
but
yes.
then worrying about all this stuff like wanting to provide a house for them and food and clothing,
Hmm.
but then when they get older, or just so that the time that you start taking them out of the house or they start to walk, then you got to be worried about people coming around and like
Right.
things kind of, and that might even be the biggest thing. What if it's the people that you actually live with, or the person that you that you love the most. So like these are
So
like the guy. I
I
guess
wanted like
I know like
I
to me it's
sorry.
no, to me it's so amazing that people can find someone, they fall in love, and they make a child. But it baffles me
Hmm.
that we go to the hospital, that they help you give birth to this gorgeous little child, and then in 24 hours they just send you home, and they don't give you any idea of like how to change the diaper, or like any instructions. It's just so, and this is so important knowledge that I wish it was provided to everyone, because every single person who has a kid um should understand how to prevent this. So
And so I will say that I think there's a lot of expectation. There's a lot of great programs out there who will teach you about parenting and who provide a lot of assistance. Child sex abuse is one very few people talk about because it's so uncomfortable,
mhm.
and because we don't talk about it, it continues to be truly, it is statistically the number one health crisis that children will face. And the biggest issue is that it's happening more than 90% of the time by the people that you love and trust and invite into your own home or live with. And so stranger danger was something that used to be taught when I was growing up, and we no longer teach that because the vast majority of the time, the person who's going to hurt your child is not a stranger. It is somebody you brought into your own home. And so then people get really uncomfortable with talking about it. And I think that there's an expectation when having and raising children that you will have learned everything you need to learn from your own parents. But what about, those of us who grew up when in very troubling homes, not my parents, but other relatives? I I could tell you that the vast majority of my childhood, those are the memories that I have. I remember being abused. I remember being traumatized. And then I remember feeling like I had no worth if it wasn't of a sexual nature, that women were only, their worth only was based on their body and what they looked like. And so it took a long time for me to get that back. The idea of what beauty is and what worth is and what self-esteem is. It took a long time for me to get that back. And then as a parent, having a child go through that is the most horrible thing I've ever been through in my life. I would rather go through it 100 times and more than have my child go through it. And so I was at a complete loss. And then I found out that, oh, there are classes you can take as a parent. There is a way that you can prevent it. I didn't know that. And so my mission is to teach other parents that before it's too late, but then also to be there for them just in case their child is one of the 1 in 6, or their child is one of the 400,000 babies that will be born this year that will be sexually abused. I want to be there for them, and I want them to know that there's a place that they can get help.
I mean, everyone's listening to the show, and everyone that will listen to the show, I know this is a very uncomfortable thing to talk about to your kids or to your friends or family, but let's prevent future cases and
Mhm.
provide a really wonderful childhood. Remember, don't ever allow someone to damage someone's childhood. If you had a great childhood, then we're really happy for you. But some children
Mhm.
start off on the wrong foot. we would never want you to have cancer or have any kind of issue when you're a child. This is exactly the same thing.
Mhm.
It's putting you literally off on the wrong foot or putting you behind financially. So if you could please, you know, listen to everything we're talking about. It's really important to really protect children as much as possible and always be leery of everyone, especially when kids are around. So,
Yeah, there and the one thing that we teach is a way to protect your kids without instilling fear into them and without being fearful yourself. And so we go through that in the training. And I personally have really taken an interest in how to prevent it in the military because Darkness to Light has done a really good job of working state by state, getting the law passed so that all teachers and um, youth sports coaches have to take this training. But in the military, particularly in the case of my son, where this was happening, there is no there's no accountability in the military, and so we have these amazing service members who are going overseas, saving our country, literally saving our freedoms and our lives. And back home, their children are being sexually abused and nobody knows what to do about it. And so my biggest focus with Operation Innocence is to protect the children of these heroes. And we call them our hometown heroes. These are the kids who are back home while our service members are doing a really hard job and they are going through some horrific pains. And I want to help and protect those children as much as possible. So I focus very much now on military bases and military bases around the world because we have about 800 military bases around the world. And there just aren't that many licensed facilitators like myself who can teach the child prevention classes on military installations. So I've started working a database of people who are trained in child sex abuse prevention who also have an affiliation with the military so they can get on base and teach this to the families and the service members.
how long does it if you're going to take a course,
Mhm.
is this an afternoon course that you can be apprised of, or does this take a couple weeks or
No, it's so crazy. It's only 2 hours.
okay?
Like it's truly only 2 hours of everyone's lives. And it's really hard to get people to take the class, but Darkness to Light did this really great thing last year. They put it online. And so you don't even have to wait for someone like me to teach it. You can just go to d2l.org. It's for Darkness to Light. And you can take the 2 hour training online. And then it has supplemental training. So there's trainings about how to talk to your kids. And then there's a training they partnered with on specifically age appropriate kid training on child sex abuse. Because I can tell you that preventing child sex abuse is 100% an adult responsibility. But because we know that 60 to 70% of abusers are adults, then we also have to teach kids what to do in that situation to get themselves out of it. And then we've also discovered that 30 to 40% of the time, children are being sexually abused by older children. And so they've had to give training to kids on how to protect themselves, even though it truly is an adult responsibility.
I there's so many interesting and fascinating things. I did not hear the last time that you said it was an online course. That it gives me more incentive. If you
Mm-hmm.
spend an hour or 2 hours on Facebook or Instagram, can you guys
Right?
please just take one day out of your existence on this wonderful earth and please just get some education? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
education is the foundation of becoming a world renowned person and being more scholarly. So this is just something you should put in your Rolodex of knowledge. So please can you say that website again so people
Mm-hmm. It is D2L, that's the number two, D2L.org. I truly cannot think of a more important class for any adult to take, even if you don't have children. If you have nieces or nephews, or you have children in your lives whatsoever, truly there is nothing more important than you can do then go online and take a 2-hour class.
Now, I thought I heard you say that there were certain states that were requiring this training. Is that correct?
Hmm.
So what state?
Texas and Delaware for sure. And I'd have to look and see, because I work on a lot of federal legislation with D2L. We just had another one passed by President Trump last year. So my
Congratulations.
focus, thank you, my focus is federal legislation. And I'm supposed to be meeting with Senator Lee coming up soon so that we can work on a new one. But
Well,
Darkness to Light does a great job of working on a state level as well and working on state legislation. And I know that Texas and Delaware are two states that passed mandatory training for teachers.
okay. Well, let's not skip over the senator, because one of the reasons
Mm-hmm.
why you do run for a pageant and you go after is that sometimes you get preferential treatment to speak to a senator. And why don't you explain
Yeah.
that experience, because that's one of the reasons why you definitely want to do a pageant, is that you were
Mm-hmm.
able to talk about this and be able to push this agenda and this platform and really save children's lives. So
Yeah. So previously, when I lived in Maryland and I was Mrs. Maryland International, it was because I could call and say, "Hi, I'm Mrs. Maryland," that the governor of Maryland, his crime prevention office, had me come in and teach the 2-hour training to all the staff. And so to have that door opened up, and I've had it happen, even as a former news anchor, sometimes it's really, really hard to just get into the media and to get your story out there. But when you can say, "I'm Mrs. Maryland," or, for me now, I live in California because we're a military family and we PCS a lot. So if I could say, "I'm Mrs. California," the
that's your
doors
next
that it
step.
opens,
That's your next step. Jessica.
cross your fingers, the doors that it opens are incredible. And that's one reason I love pageants, because I have had so much success and luck with the media and politicians willing to sit down with me. Previously, when I lived in Idaho, where that was, oh gosh, 6 years ago or now, when I lived in Idaho, I had the mayor, the sheriff, the police chief, all in the county that I lived in, taking the course and signing the pledge, promising that the city was going to protect children from sex abuse. And so when you have that title, it opens doors. And right now, I am talking to Senator Lee's office. Now he's out of Utah, which is technically where I'm from. And when my son was abused, Senator Lee, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna get teary here. Senator Lee was the only person willing to help me and talk to me. I think a lot of parents who've been through this know this pain. And I actually just last week was interviewed by the accountability office, the government accountability office. That is the organization that holds the federal government accountable. And they are right now doing a big study to report back to Congress on child sex abuse in the military. And they asked me if I would do an interview, which I did, so they can give it back to Congress and say, "Here's what's happening with the military families and child sex abuse." And I told them the same thing that I'm going to tell all of your podcast listeners. When my son was sexually abused, and it was affiliated with the military, with a military base and a member of the military, I couldn't get anyone to open an investigation. Not the local police department, not child protective services, not the military, no one. Nobody knew how to handle this 7 years ago. And Senator Lee was the only one who responded to my pleas for help and was able to get the state of Utah to, at the very least, open an investigation, which, although it didn't, the investigation itself didn't was closed rapidly and did not go the way that it was supposed to, it did lead to a protective order and finally to the ability for me to keep my son safe and away from his abuser. Without Senator Lee, my son would still be in danger right now and would not be the child who is healing and happy and has moved on and has become an advocate with me and given me permission to tell his story. He just would not be there if it weren't for Senator Lee helping me.
I mean,
So,
that's a perfect example. And sometimes we all we want is acknowledgement that we are being listened to, and um, you're okay with just getting acknowledgement, but you wanted, best scenarios that action would have occurred and that would be
Hmm.
went further, but at least you got acknowledgement that they
Yeah.
really want. I mean, sometimes they refuse to even give us acknowledgement, and it just shows that
Right.
having a little bit, you don't have to have a national title. You can have a state title. You can have a local
Hmm.
title, and they'll give you a little bit of acknowledgement, which is, you know, and it's just it's sad, but we live in a male society, and men, for some reason, only associate women that have some kind of like beauty, some kind. So if that's what it takes, then use the dumb male society brain against them, okay, and just put on the sash, okay, and get whatever you want accomplished, okay. I'm totally approve, and I really want more women to run for office and local and state and the national office. And if that's what you have to do to manipulate and to cause change, then I'm go for it. Then and it just shows that um, sometimes they're just too stubborn, especially when it's really something important. Like you have a child that's really um, in pain, and they won't do anything for whatever reason. And you finally found someone that would listen, and that's so important. You just want someone to listen to you. I don't know, like it's so important that when people are in pain, you need to find someone that's going to listen.
And I found that Senator Lee, I followed him ever since then, and he has been involved in other legislation that has been drafted to protect, victims of human trafficking, victims of sexual assault, and I'm just so honored that he is the senator from my home state, and then even more honored that his staff is willing to set up an appointment for me to meet with him, because I don't know if people are aware or not, there is not a child sex abuse awareness month. And I think it's about time that there is. People are too scared to talk about child sex abuse, which is why so many predators get away with it, because people are very uncomfortable with the conversation.
I, I hey, you get that initiative start. I'll be signature number one if you
Thank
don't
you.
if you don't if you don't mind, or I can be A1 because I'm sure you want to be the first one on your own.
That's true. I'll be number one.
Yeah. um.
We'll
So
let Senator Lee be number two. If
sure.
you will take three.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no, but yeah, absolutely. Children need a month recognizing
Hmm.
um, any kind of torture of any kind against them, if it's sexual, if it's physical, if it's mental. Um, the best thing it goes back to what I keep on saying. It's like I would never want to start my life off having a cancer or having someone abuse me or having to um, have a terrible life. I mean, you're just guaranteed to have a bad life. I mean, I don't know, like you're 100. I mean, am I wrong? I mean, is that
Well,
statistically, or is that
so another thing I often tell people is, statistically, I shouldn't be where I am today. I am a survivor of child sex abuse, and I should not be, in a very healthy marriage and a happy marriage with two healthy kids who are doing well. I work for the Navy. I'm the director of the Public Affairs and Congressional Affairs Office. I
congratulations?
have, thank you. I have a great staff. I have a great job. I love my job. I love my family, and that's not where I should typically be. But as my son, my 19-year-old son, who's an amazing survivor and advocate, often tells people, just because somebody hurts you today does not mean they get to take away your tomorrow. You get to decide what your future is going to be. And so when you are able to get out of the situation that you're in, you decide what that looks like for you, and you decide your future. And he's absolutely right, because at some point I had to say, I need to take responsibility for my life now. Because when growing up as, somebody who was just constantly being abused, I did not make very good choices when I was 18. I made horrible choices. I went exactly down the road that, statistically speaking, any expert would have told you I would have gone down, not knowing that. I had no idea. That's exactly the road I went down. And at some point when I became a mother, I said, I can't do this. I can't do this to my own kids. I can't I can't do this to myself. I have to value myself enough to change the trajectory that I am on. And so I did that. It took time and it took a lot of self-love and self-care and therapy, but I did that. And so I know that if I can do it, anyone else can do it.
So, in your opinion, you feel that your actions were worse than a normal 20-year-old, 30-year-old acting
Oh,
out?
yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. By a lot. Absolutely.
You know, it shows that you have a strong courage and resistance that, one, you were able to rectify it within yourself. You were able to
Hmm.
find someone to speak to. And yes, you've unfortunately had a child that had to go through this, but he sounds like he's on the right path
Oh,
already.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's already much farther than where you were, and hopefully
Hmm.
he will stay on that path and he'll be okay for the rest of his life. So
And I have to tell you, I'm so proud of my kids. I mean, I have a 19-year-old who has now decided what he wants to do with his future, is going to school for that. And he's a good kid. He's guarded, which is to be expected. The one thing I want parents to know is that one of the hardest parts about the healing and the moving on process is realizing that your child is never going to be the same person they used to be. And you have to be okay with that. They're going to change. Being sexually abused remaps your brain. I mean, literally, scientifically, physically changes the wiring and remaps your brain. And they are going to be different than they were. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just different. And he is different than he used to be, but he's a good kid and he cares about people and he has compassion. And he now goes forward in life wanting to help other people. And so, just because you have this trauma as a child doesn't mean it has to ruin your life. And he's in a good example of that.
maybe he's in a more stronger place going through such a harder thing that when life gets really hard, that will help him succeed more. It's hard to say that he'd have to go through that because of that, but maybe it's
Hmm.
going to make him be more successful. That he knows that I've already gone through something
Yeah.
way more um, terrible in my life. So,
And I'll tell you, I wouldn't take back what happened to me as a kid for anything in the world. I would go through it again and again and again, because then when I became a mom, I was the only one who could sit down on the floor with a 5-year-old and hold him and say, I understand. And I promise you, we will get through this together. And when everybody else was frustrated and wanted to throw their hands up in the air, because as all other parents of survivors know, that first couple of years, your child is a nightmare. And also the saying that the children who need the most love show it in the most difficult ways is so accurate. It is so hard in that first couple of years that they are going through the healing process. But I would go through it over and over again because I understood and I had patience. And I said, I know what you're going through. And I never lost my patience during that healing process because I had already been there.
I just wanted to take one extra second and talk about our sponsor of the week, Mid Atlantic Video and Photography Production. No matter if you're planning a wedding and you need a wedding videographer, you're doing a music video, or you're doing a commercial, they are the team to get the job done. You can reach out to them at 443 422 3830. Again, that's 443 422 3830. Or you can go right to their website at mavpp.com. Now let's get right back to this great interview. Okay, so now that we got through really, really important stuff, but very hard stuff, let's end on some fun stuff. So
Yes, we can't
what
end on that. It's
one
depressing.
one being, please tell us that you decided that you're going to run for Miss California, because I all would love to be the breaking news, because we had debated this the last show. So
Hmm.
have you thought this over more? Can this be the breaking?
I would say this has been on my mind nonstop. So
Okay.
It's probably the question I get asked the most ever since Mrs. International is, are you going to compete again? And are you going to compete for Mrs. California International? I have loved every moment that I have lived in California, and I just adore and respect the California director so, so much. He is an amazing person. And I can tell you that my husband said yes.
Okay.
so,
Well, your husband is
so
he's such an adorable guy.
thank
You've
you.
married the perfect pageant husband because let me explain how awesome he is. One, because no husband that I know that has a pageant wife goes to this line. One, he's your personal photographer. Kudos to you.
Hmm.
He comes out and he does video of her too, and then
Hmm.
so she doesn't need any bodyguard. She's got a military husband that does photography and videography, and he just happens to do that for his regular job. So he's a like professional.
Mm.
So like you have it set. We just need you to win nationals. So
Right,
okay.
right. And for anyone who has ever competed with me at nationals, if there was a Mr. Congeniality, he would have won. And not because he's the friendliest, but because he is helpful and he is honest and he'll tell you the truth if you ask him a question, which is good and bad, but because he cares. And
Sometimes it's
so
better to be brutally
yeah,
honest than
yes,
to be sweet and
yes.
nice.
And every single pageant, he has made so many friends, some that he still talks to even a year later. And I have so many women come up and say, your husband was so nice to me backstage, or my husband just loves your husband, or I'll have the staff tell me, your husband was just so helpful. And it's so funny because in 2016, I did my first pageant in 8 years. So my second pageant ever. And my husband said, okay, this is it, never again. To now, we get done with Mrs. International and I get off stage and somebody says, okay, are you going to come back next year? And I just got second runner up. And I was so happy for Robin because she's a friend of mine and she's so wonderful. But I was also, it does sting when you try so hard and you want to so much. And so I was in a place of, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to compete again. And my husband was like, well, you can do it again.
He's so awesome.
But
He's so
he's
awesome.
great. And so we had a very long conversation about it in the last couple of days. And I did talk to Mrs. California International Director. And at this point, I have two paths that I can go down. And I'm still kind of like doing some soul searching and trying to make a decision. But I can promise you I'm not done competing because if I was done, I would have already signed up to be a director.
Well, before we get on to that topic, because I want to ask you about that. So one of the cool things about international is that they have those open seeds where you can. Isn't that cool? Do you enjoy doing the open seed where you can be a non-state and you can like the last title you had
Mm-hmm.
is your mid-Atlantic, right?
Right. So my no,
Mid.
Atlantic States. So my regional title, I was Mrs. Atlantic States, and I did love that you could have a regional title if you are returning. So I had been Mrs. Maryland my first year and then Atlantic States my second year. And I love that about the system that you can be a regional title holder. I do wish that more states had directors and were holding state pageants. And I do really love the idea, although I haven't done it yet, of having a director that's there to guide me and kind of help me and know what to expect and look for. Although at this point, come on, I should know. I've done it a few
I
times.
was gonna say you basically won. Okay, you were right there. So
I was right.
what
I'm
else?
so
What else can
close.
the director tell you? Pat you on the
Well,
back. Pat
maybe
you on the back.
you know
You
what,
got it, girl. Go for it.
and I'll tell you that goes a long way. And I am
Okay. Hey, just call
so
me.
grateful for my coach.
Just call me.
Okay, that'll work.
I'll just you
You'll
call me.
pat
I'll
me on
tell
the
you.
back.
You can go
You
for it,
got
girl.
this. My coach is Amanda Marino. I think a lot of the international girls know her, and she was texting me, and that's the great thing about her. She knows what you need, and all I needed was for her to say, "You got this. Go out there and be yourself." And she was there at the pageant, and it anyway. It was wonderful to have her, and I'm so grateful to have her as a coach. but I do think it would be great to have a director, and I haven't done that yet.
Well, I asked the question, but we lost it. So if you had, so I got to ask you one more time so you can
Okay.
modify. So if you had the chance, and these are considered if someone leaves their post, so none of the
Mm-hmm.
direct,
Mm-hmm.
what states or state would you like to take over and become
Okay.
and assume for international, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right.
Right. So I want to start off by saying how much I love living in California. And I love what I know about the system. I have not competed for California International before, but from what I know, I love it. And it would be an honor to be part of that staff someday. But as a director, if I could just choose any state, I would for sure start off with my home state of Utah. And then over time, I would want to take on Nevada and Idaho also, because they are all right there next to each other. And when I was younger, I grew up in Idaho, and it's a great pageant state. And Idaho and Utah are very similar and very close to each other. So I think it would be really easy to take both of those states to start off with.
I mean, like I said previously, there's nothing better than going to. If you haven't had the pleasure of going to Utah, Utah is one of the most
Oh,
gorgeous
it
states.
is.
It is
It is.
absolutely. And if you just love westerns, like they shot like 90% of them in that famous range there. It's just so gorgeous. And
Mm-hmm.
then of course Nevada is Nevada. I mean, there's
Oh, Nevada's
yeah,
amazing.
I know. So um
What we talked about last time, and we ran out of time, was just we were talking so much about the difference between DC, where I just came from, and the Utah, basically East Coast versus West Coast. And
oh
I just
yeah.
want to say that Utah is so friendly and community oriented, as is Idaho. And so I think it's a great pageant state, which is where I started, by the way, was Mrs. Utah, United States. It's such a great pageant state. You have so many amazing women who are truly out there serving their communities. And Utah is the reason I even found out about pageants in the first place. And the reason that my naive opinion about pageants was changed into something positive, because I got to meet these women who were making a real difference in their community, and they were doing it with or without a crown. And I just love Utah for the way that they treat their neighbors, and the way that they care about their community, and how they're trying to improve it for the better. And they do it in such a loving way.
Well, I think the way you described it is that people on the East Coast are more about the moment and what's going on, and then Utah and people in the Midwest are more about family, not living living more in today and not in the moment. So
I my personal experience in the DC area was that it's very career driven. And so it was really good for my career to now be the director of a communication shop for the military is really important. It's really helped and blessed my family. But also I felt that there was a little bit of a disconnect. And I know a lot of really amazing girls back in we call it the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, as you know.
mhm.
Back in the DMV, there are a lot of great women who are doing amazing things in their community, and they feel very connected. But I personally struggled a little bit until I became Mrs. Maryland to find that connection, and to have a connection to my state and to my community. But in Utah and Idaho, I never had to struggle to find that. And now that I'm in California, same thing. I don't struggle to find that. It's just there. And I maybe it's me. There are probably a lot of girls in the DMV that are like, I don't have a problem with that at all. But for me, it just felt so career driven, where out west it feels very community driven.
Well, it's important to find what you are comfortable with, and then clearly
Mm-hmm.
you're more comfortable with the environment that
Yeah.
is put together on the West Coast, so
Yeah.
or in the Midwest. So it's good that you found that and you're happy with it. So you know,
And there's no humidity. So it's great for my hair.
haha, Paul, haha. Well, I again, this has been an absolute fabulous interview. So I hope you think it went well, because it definitely went well on my side. I would love for you to please tell them all about how to connect with the organization again. Also, please tell them that you do your own podcast. So please mention that. So please tell them all about yourself and how to contact you, and how to encourage you to go for Miss California. So
I would love to, love to. So my partner organization is Darkness to Light. So you can go to d2l.org and take the child sex abuse prevention training online or in person. But if you want to know more about what I do specifically with military in preventing child sex abuse, my website is operationinnocence.org. And then you can find Operation Innocence on Instagram and Facebook. And then just my personal stuff. So aside from all of that, I have a Christian blog and podcast called Motherhood in the Latter Days. It's a little bit of a spin off the name of my church, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so you can find Motherhood in the Latter Days on Facebook and Instagram, and find me on Instagram. And I think the question that I get asked a lot lately is just about my name. Most people call me Elizabeth, and my name is Jennifer Elizabeth Peace. And so for everybody who wants to know about the name, I'm actually going to be writing a blog very soon, within the next week or two, and maybe doing a podcast on this, and why people who experience traumatic childhoods will sometimes grow up and change their name, or just ask not to be called by their first name any longer. And then how I healed, and why and how I became okay, and was able to move on. So for everyone who's like super confused about all of that, if you find Motherhood in the Latter Days, then you'll find me.
well, we really appreciate you coming on the show, and we're very thankful that you have found peace and that your son is doing well. And we
Thank
really
you.
am so happy that you're affecting change. And I really hope the best that the senator in Utah is able to get some laws passed to at
Mm-hmm.
least get the word out, to mandate that there must be some teaching at some level.
Mm-hmm.
So we really appreciate that. That's something that's definitely good Christian um, praying effort going on to do good work. So we really appreciate that. So
And I appreciate you letting me talk on your podcast about a very difficult topic, so
oh
everybody
no.
could hear about
No,
it.
I think it's really important. This show is about pageants, and it's about acting, it's about sports, and it's about all that kind of stuff. But after you're done doing a pageant, or after you're done being an actor, life actually occurs, and this is the stuff that's really important. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone that wants to have a family is going to should be trained on this. So we really appreciate you making people aware of that. I do, and I hope all of our listeners really appreciate you telling. Now, I want everyone to know I'm going to have all of her information below. So if you just happened to miss something, she's going to have her bio and everything. So please reach out to her. And I know Elizabeth loves talking to people. And
Mm-hmm.
she'll give you good advice. She might be busy, but she will definitely get back to you. So please, if you have any questions, she's definitely the person to talk to. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I had so much fun today.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for coming on the show. It's so important that we protect children, no matter if they are a little baby or a 10-year-old. It's important to know that things can happen um, inside the home or outside the house, and we need to protect our children and make them feel warm and safe, and make sure that they have a safe environment. And I really appreciate there are people like you going out there affecting government change to make sure that they will actually teach this, as well as talk about it and make it more comfortable for people to understand about it. This interview was incredible. I really appreciate your time. We actually, guys, if you didn't hear, we have been trying to do this interview 4 times. One, the the actual interview was struck by lightning, and we lost the entire recording. 2 times, I overslept. Yes, I overslept twice. And I thank Elizabeth for taking the interview. And then we finally had to do the interview at 11 o'clock at night East Coast time. So I really appreciate Jennifer for her time and just being able to be on the show. And I really hope that everyone takes this opportunity to register and actually take the course. If you have 2 hours of free time to play on Facebook, you can take that course and you can become an expert. And I hope you guys do, and I expect you guys to. On a somber note, as a reminder, this show is produced and put on YouTube as well as iTunes. So we would love for you guys to follow us on both iTunes and on YouTube. On YouTube, please give us a thumb up or thumb down. Tell us how we're doing. Leave us a comment. Let's build this conversation. Let's build this community. The show drops Thursday afternoon, so please stay tuned, and we will see you next week.